The notification lit up Elena Brooks's phone at exactly 11:42 p.m., slicing through the quiet of the apartment like a blade. She hadn't meant to look. She was only reaching for the charger on the kitchen counter, still warm from the tea she hadn't finished. But the screen was already awake, glowing in the dark. "Your reservation at the Ritz-Carlton, Manhattan, is confirmed." Elena froze. For a moment she told herself it had to be a mistake, a spam email, a glitch, anything but what her instincts were screaming. Her heart began to pound so hard she could feel it in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she picked up the phone again. The reservation wasn't under her name. It was under Liam Carter's, her husband. The silence in the apartment felt heavy, almost accusatory. The clock on the microwave blinked 11:43. Outside, Manhattan hummed, as it always did. Cars rushing, sirens in the distance, a city that never paused for anyone's heartbreak. Elena scrolled further. A second name appeared beneath his. Harper Lane. Her fingers went numb. Liam had told her he was meeting investors, a late dinner. "Don't wait up," he'd said casually that morning while adjusting his jacket in the mirror. He'd kissed her cheek like it meant nothing, already halfway out the door. Now, Elena stood alone in their kitchen, staring at proof that her marriage had been quietly rotting behind her back. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, a strange calm washed over her, the kind that comes before a storm. She leaned against the counter, steadying herself, her eyes drifting to the framed photo on the wall. Their wedding day. Liam smiling wide, her own face soft with belief. She had trusted that smile. She had trusted him. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Liam. "Running late, big night, don't wait up." Big night. Elena let out a slow breath and locked the phone, placing it face down as if it might burn her skin. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back at her. 30 years old, eyes tired, shoulders tense. She looked like a woman holding herself together with invisible stitches. What Liam didn't know, what no one in this city knew, was that Elena Brooks wasn't powerless. She wasn't the quiet, financially dependent wife he believed her to be. She wasn't the woman he could discard and replace without consequence. But tonight wasn't about revenge. Not yet. Tonight was about the moment everything changed. She turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. In the bedroom, Liam's side of the bed was still perfectly made, untouched, as if he'd already decided this place no longer belonged to him. Elena sat on the edge of the mattress, her hands clenched in her lap. Somewhere in a luxury hotel room just miles away, her husband was betraying her, and he had no idea what he'd just set in motion. Elena didn't confront Liam the next morning. She woke before dawn, as she always did, her body trained by years of trying to be the easiest person to live with. The other side of the bed was still cold. He hadn't come home. That fact sat in her chest like a stone, but she swallowed it down and moved through the apartment quietly, almost carefully, as if the walls themselves might accuse her of knowing too much. She brewed coffee and poured it into the same chipped mug she'd used for years. It tasted bitter, but she drank it anyway. Outside the window, Manhattan was already alive. People hurried to jobs, to meetings, to lives that seemed so certain compared to hers. At 7:18 a.m., the front door finally opened. Liam stepped inside, loosening his tie, his expression relaxed in a way that made Elena's stomach twist. He smelled faintly of unfamiliar perfume layered over expensive soap. He glanced at her, then smiled. "Morning," he said easily. "You're up early." Elena forced herself to return the smile. "Couldn't sleep." He didn't ask why. Instead, he walked straight to the kitchen, checking his phone as if nothing in the world had shifted overnight. He talked about traffic, about a potential deal, about how exhausting his week was going to be. Every word felt rehearsed, polished, safe. Elena listened. She always did. She set a plate in front of him, scrambled eggs already cooling. Liam frowned slightly. You didn't need to cook. I'm grabbing lunch with a client later. A client. The word echoed in her mind, but she nodded. Of course. When she reached for her purse to head out, her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. Confused, Elena opened it. Her checking account balance blinked back at her, nearly empty. She refreshed the screen. Same number. Her breath caught. She checked again, this time logging into the desktop on her MacBook Air, her hands trembling just enough to make typing difficult. The joint account showed a large transfer made late last night, authorized by Liam. Is something wrong? He asked, not looking up. Elena swallowed. The account, it's lower than usual. Liam sighed, finally meeting her eyes. His tone shifted, turning sharp in that familiar, dismissive way. I moved some money around. You know how tight things are right now. Tight. They lived in a downtown apartment with a skyline view. He wore tailored suits and drove a luxury car. Yet somehow, she was always the one being told to spend less. You don't really need access to all of it, he continued. It just stresses you out. The words landed hard. Elena nodded again, because that was what she'd learned to do. Agree, soften, disappear. By the time she stepped outside, the weight of it all pressed down on her chest. She walked 3 blocks before sitting on a bench, staring at nothing, her coffee long gone cold in her hand. Liam hadn't just betrayed her. He had started erasing her. And Elena understood, with terrifying clarity, that this wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. Elena first saw Harper Lane 3 days later, under lighting designed to make everyone look powerful and untouchable. The fundraiser was held on a rooftop in Midtown, glass walls reflecting the Manhattan skyline like a curated illusion. Elena almost didn't go. She told herself she was tired, that crowds drained her. But something inside her insisted. Running would only make her smaller. She chose a simple black dress she'd owned for years and tied her hair back neatly. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to breathe in a room where she wasn't someone's burden. Liam was already there when she arrived. He stood near the bar, laughing too easily, his hand resting at the small of a woman's back. A young woman, confident, beautiful in a way that knew it was being watched. Harper Lane. Elena recognized her instantly, not because Liam had ever mentioned her, but because Harper carried herself like someone who had already decided she belonged wherever she stood. Her dress was sleek, her smile practiced. When she laughed, people leaned in. Liam saw Elena a second later. The smile on his face flickered just barely, before he smoothed it out and walked toward her. You made it, he said, surprised. I didn't think you'd feel up to it. I changed my mind, Elena replied calmly. Harper followed him over, heels clicking softly against the floor. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume and certainty. She extended a manicured hand. You must be Elena, Harper said warmly. I've heard so much about you. Elena shook her hand. Harper's grip was firm, deliberate, possessive. All good things, I hope, Elena said. Harper smiled wider. Of course. Liam talks about how grounded you are, how simple your life is. It's refreshing. Simple. The word slid between them like a blade wrapped in silk. Liam cleared his throat. Harper works in PR. She's been helping with some upcoming deals. Helping a lot, Harper added lightly. Her hand drifted back to Liam's arm, fingers resting there just a second too long to be accidental. Elena watched the gesture with a strange detachment. It wasn't the touch itself that hurt. It was the confidence behind it. Harper wasn't hiding. She was staking a claim. Throughout the evening, Elena felt it again and again, Harper positioning herself beside Liam, laughing at his jokes, guiding conversations. At one point, Elena overheard Harper say, "Liam and I spend so much time together, we practically live at the office." Elena's chest tightened, but she said nothing. The final blow came when Harper lifted her phone near the balcony, angling it just right to capture the skyline, Liam and Elena standing slightly behind them. She smiled sweetly as she snapped the photo. "For memories," Harper said. An hour later, as Elena stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. Harper had posted the photo. The caption read, "Some nights change everything." Elena stared at the screen as the elevator doors slid shut. In that moment, she understood. Harper wasn't an accident. She was an announcement. Liam didn't deny it. That was what stunned Elena the most. She waited until they were alone that night, the apartment wrapped in a silence that felt too thin to trust. Liam loosened his tie, tossed his jacket over a chair, and moved like a man who had already rehearsed this moment in his head. "You were very quiet tonight," he said casually, opening the fridge. "Everything okay?" Elena stood by the window, arms folded, the city lights blurring beyond the glass. "You and Harper seem close." Liam smiled, slow and patient, as if she were a child misunderstanding something obvious. "She's a colleague." "I told you that." "You booked a hotel with her." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Liam didn't flinch. Instead, he sighed, rubbing his temples. "I knew this was coming." Elena turned to face him. "Coming?" "This," he said gently. "You jumping to conclusions. You letting your anxiety spiral." Her stomach dropped. "You're saying I imagined the reservation?" she asked quietly. "No," he replied. "I'm saying you don't understand how business works. Sometimes optics matter. Sometimes rooms are booked for meetings. PR people travel with executives. That doesn't mean anything inappropriate is happening." Elena stared at him, searching his face for something real, anything. All she saw was calm control. "You posted a photo together," she said, with a caption that suggested. Liam cut her off. "Harper is ambitious. She likes attention. That's her personality. You can't take everything so personally." "Personally." Her hands clenched. "She touched you. Repeatedly." "That's your perception," Liam replied smoothly. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. Ever since everything that happened before." He didn't say the word miscarriage. He never did. Elena felt her chest tighten. "Don't do that." "Do what?" he asked, feigning confusion. "Use my pain to make me doubt myself." Liam's expression hardened for just a second before softening again. "I'm worried about you, Elena. You've been distant, sensitive. I'm carrying a lot right now, and I need support, not accusations." Support. The word landed like a verdict. "I gave up my job for you," Elena said quietly. "I followed you here. I manage this home. I make space for your life." "And I appreciate that," Liam said quickly. "But appreciation doesn't mean you get to police me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you keep acting like this, people are going to start wondering if you're stable. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. Elena felt something inside her go cold. She understood now. This wasn't about truth. It was about power, about rewriting reality until she was the problem. I think you should take a break, Liam continued. Maybe less access to finances, less stress. Focus on yourself. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing her husband's face. Liam believed he was winning, and Elena realized that if she didn't stop trying to explain herself to a man determined not to listen, she would lose more than her marriage. She would lose herself. Elena met Adrian Cole on a Tuesday afternoon she almost canceled. The office building on Park Avenue rose quiet and imposing, all glass and steel. The kind of place where decisions were made behind closed doors and never explained twice. Elena hesitated at the entrance, her reflection staring back at her from the polished doors. She looked smaller here, quieter, exactly the way Liam liked her to be. She checked the email again. Adrian Cole, CEO. Private meeting requested. No reason given. Inside, the lobby was hushed. Elena gave her name at the desk and was escorted upstairs without delay. No waiting, no confusion. That alone made her uneasy. The conference room overlooked the Manhattan skyline, sunlight cutting clean lines across the table. Adrian Cole stood by the window when she entered. Tall, composed, his posture rigid in a way that suggested discipline rather than ease. "Ms. Brooks," he said, turning to face her. His voice was calm, unreadable. "Thank you for coming." She nodded. "Your assistant said this was about the foundation." "It is," he replied. "And it isn't." He gestured for her to sit, but didn't take a seat himself. Instead, he remained standing, as if he didn't intend to stay long. "You helped prevent a reputational crisis for one of my subsidiaries 3 years ago," Adrian continued. "You did it quietly. You refused public credit." Elena frowned. "I was just doing my job." Adrian's gaze held hers. "No, you did more than that. And you didn't ask for anything in return." The words unsettled her. "Why bring this up now?" "Because," he said carefully, "I've been told you might need support." Elena stiffened. "By whom?" Adrian didn't answer directly. "I won't ask you personal questions. I won't assume anything about your marriage. But I will say this. What's happening to you is visible to people who know what to look for." Her throat tightened. She hated how close that landed to the truth. "I'm not asking for help," she said quickly. "I know," Adrian replied. "That's why I'm offering options, not rescue." He slid a slim folder across the table. Inside were details, temporary housing contacts, an independent legal consultant, a financial advisor unaffiliated with her husband. "No strings," he said. "No publicity, no obligation." Elena stared at the folder, then back at him. "Why?" Adrian paused, just a fraction longer than necessary. "Because I owe you. And because no one deserves to be cornered into silence." Something in his tone cracked the wall she'd been holding up for weeks. Not enough to break it, just enough to let her breathe. "I don't need saving," she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. "I know. When you're ready to stand on your own, I'll step back." She gathered the folder, her hands steady now. As she stood, Adrian finally sat, his gaze lowering in a rare gesture of respect. Whatever happens next, he said, don't doubt your reality. Elena walked out of the building lighter than she had in days. For the first time, someone had seen the truth and hadn't tried to rewrite it. Elena realized something was wrong the moment her key didn't turn. It was just after midnight, the hallway outside the apartment silent except for the distant hum of the elevator. She stood there with her purse on her shoulder, grocery bag cutting into her fingers, and tried the lock again. Nothing. The deadbolt wouldn't budge. She frowned and checked the number on the door, a sudden chill creeping up her spine. It was the right apartment. Their apartment. Elena? She turned. The doorman stood at the end of the hall, uncertainty written across his face. Everything okay, ma'am? My key isn't working, she said, forcing calm into her voice. He hesitated, then glanced at his tablet. Mr. Carter called earlier. He asked us to update the access code. The words didn't register at first. Update it? How? He shifted uncomfortably. He requested your access be temporarily disabled. Temporarily. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. So I can't go in? She asked. I'm sorry, the doorman said quietly. He said it was a domestic issue. Domestic issue. As if her life could be reduced to a checkbox. Elena stepped back from the door, her hands shaking now. Can I at least get my things? The doorman shook his head. He was clear. No entry without his approval. She stood there for a long moment, the hallway lights too bright, too exposed. Then the elevator chimed, and a couple stepped out, laughing softly, keys in hand. They glanced at her, then looked away. Humiliation burned hotter than fear. Outside, rain had started to fall, light at first, then heavier, soaking through her coat as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Manhattan didn't notice. Cabs sped past. Neon signs reflected off wet pavement. The city moved on. Elena checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. She typed Liam's name, stared at it, then erased the text without sending it. A few blocks away, she stopped beneath an awning, breath uneven. Her hands were numb, her chest tight. She opened her banking app again, desperate, and froze. Her account was frozen. A notice flashed on the screen. Access restricted. Contact primary account holder. Liam. Her legs nearly gave out. She sank onto the stoop, rain streaking down her face, mingling with tears she hadn't planned to shed. Not like this, not in public, not reduced to a woman locked out of her own life. Her phone buzzed. For one reckless second, she hoped it was him. It wasn't. An email notification appeared instead, cold and formal. Subject: Notice of intent to file for divorce. She read the first line, then the second, her vision blurring. By the time she looked up again, the rain had soaked through everything she owned. Elena Brooks sat on a Manhattan sidewalk, homeless in every way that mattered. And somewhere warm and dry, Liam Carter had decided she no longer existed. By the time Elena reached Central Park, the rain had thinned to a cold mist that clung to her hair and coat. She walked without direction, past joggers and dog walkers who moved through their routines as if the world were still intact. Each step felt borrowed, like she was trespassing in a life that no longer belonged to her. She found an empty bench near a line of bare trees and sat down slowly, her body finally acknowledging the exhaustion she'd been holding at bay. Her hands were trembling now, not from the cold alone, but from the shock settling deep in her bones. Locked out, accounts frozen, served divorce papers by email. Elena pressed her palms together and stared at the path in front of her. She had imagined many endings to her marriage. None of them looked like this. Her phone rested heavy in her pocket. She pulled it out, scrolling through contacts she hadn't used in years. Old coworkers, distant acquaintances. No one she felt she could call without explaining everything she was too tired to say. She stopped on one name, Jasper Flint. Her finger hovered over it, then pulled away. Not yet. Calling him meant opening doors she had kept sealed for years. It meant admitting she was out of options. A sharp pain bloomed in her chest, sudden and unwelcome. She leaned forward, breathing carefully, one hand pressed flat against her sternum. Images surfaced without permission. The hospital room from years ago, the sterile smell, the quiet way loss had settled into her life without warning. She had survived that. Barely. But this felt different. This felt like erasure. A couple passed by, laughing, sharing earbuds. Elena looked away, ashamed of the tears sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, angry at herself for crying where anyone could see. Liam's voice echoed in her head, calm and dismissive. "You're too sensitive." Maybe he was right. Maybe she was breaking because she'd been bent too many times already. She reached into her bag and pulled out her Kindle. The screen cracked at one corner. It opened to the last book she'd been reading, more out of habit than hope. Meditations. A passage glowed softly in the gray light. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Elena laughed quietly, the sound brittle. Strength felt like a foreign language. Still, she read the line again. Then again. Something in her breathing steadied, not because the pain was gone, but because it had a boundary now, a shape. She straightened, lifting her head. Around her, the park stretched on, vast, indifferent, alive. People stumbled, people recovered. Life didn't stop because one man decided she was disposable. Her phone buzzed. She flinched, then looked. A single text message. Unknown number. You don't have to go through this alone. Her heart skipped. She stared at the screen, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Then another message followed. I'm nearby. If you want to talk, I'll sit. If not, I'll leave. No pressure, no demands. Elena closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, and for the first time that night, allowed herself one small truth. She didn't want to be alone anymore. Adrian didn't sit beside her at first. He stopped a few steps away from the bench, hands in the pockets of his coat, posture relaxed but alert, like someone ready to leave the moment he was asked. Elena noticed that immediately. The space he kept between them felt intentional, respectful. You can tell me to go, he said calmly. I won't take it personally. Elena looked up. His face was composed, but his eyes held something quieter than before. Concern without curiosity, presence without pressure. Sit, she said, her voice low but steady. Adrian took the seat at the far end of the bench, leaving room between them. The city noises softened around them, muffled by trees and distance. For a moment, neither spoke. I'm not here to fix anything, he said finally. I don't think you need fixing. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's a first. I meant it, Adrian replied. I saw what happened tonight, not the details, just the pattern. She didn't ask how. She didn't want to know. They locked me out, she said instead, staring ahead. My accounts, my home, everything. Adrian nodded once. That's not a marital disagreement. That's coercion. The word landed hard, precise. Elena felt tears sting her eyes again, but she blinked them back. "I don't want revenge," she said quickly. "I just want space to think." "You should have that," Adrian said. "And you will." He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, tapping once before setting it face down on his knee. "I've arranged a short-term place. Neutral. Quiet. No paperwork tied to me. You don't have to accept it." Elena turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian met her gaze without flinching. "Because I've watched too many capable people get dismantled slowly, while everyone calls it a private matter. And because you once chose integrity when no one was watching." Silence settled between them again, thicker this time, but not uncomfortable. "What if I say no?" she asked. "Then I'll walk you to wherever you decide to go," he answered. "And that will be the end of it. No debt, no expectation." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the fear of dependence against the reality of exhaustion. She wasn't asking to be carried. She was asking not to drown. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just for tonight." Adrian nodded. No smile, no triumph, just acceptance. They stood together, walking toward the park exit under dim lights. A car waited at the curb, not flashy, not marked. Adrian opened the door, then stepped back, letting her enter first. As they pulled away, Elena watched Central Park disappear behind them, the bench shrinking into darkness. For the first time since the notification, her chest didn't feel so tight. Adrian didn't look at her as the city lights slid past the window. He kept his eyes forward, hands steady on his knees. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "Not trust, not gratitude, not your story." Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. For the first time in weeks, someone had helped her without taking something in return. And that changed everything. The lawyer's office smelled like polished wood and cold efficiency. Elena sat upright in the leather chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if posture alone could keep her steady. Across the table, Liam's attorney spoke in a smooth, practiced tone, the kind that made cruelty sound reasonable. "This is a straightforward agreement," the man said, sliding a thick folder toward her. "Sign here, and we can all move on." Liam sat beside him, relaxed, almost bored. He didn't look at Elena when the folder stopped inches from her hands. She opened it slowly. The first pages blurred together, legal language, clauses, waivers. Then the numbers registered. No spousal support, no claim to future earnings, no right to contest shared assets. A confidentiality agreement that would silence her completely. Elena's fingers tightened on the paper. "This says I walk away with nothing," she said quietly. Liam finally turned toward her. His expression was almost kind. "It's generous, considering." Considering what? She wanted to ask. Considering she'd given him years of her life? Considering she'd built a home around his ambition? "You don't have independent income," Liam continued. "This protects you from legal fees you can't afford." Protects. The word made her chest ache. "And if I don't sign?" Elena asked. The lawyer answered before Liam could. "Then we proceed with a contested divorce. That process is long, expensive, public." Public. Elena felt the warning settle like a weight. She imagined headlines, whispers, people dissecting her mental health, her past loss, her marriage. She imagined being painted as unstable, bitter, disposable. Liam leaned closer, lowering his voice. "This is the cleanest way. Take it." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw how certain he was. He believed she was trapped. He believed she had no leverage. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. She didn't check it. "I need time," Elena said. Liam scoffed. "Time for what? You don't have a lawyer." "I'll get one," she replied. The lawyer closed the folder with a sharp sound. "You have 48 hours. They stood. The meeting was over. In the hallway, Elena finally pulled out her phone. A message from Adrian waited. "Do not sign anything today. I'll explain when you're ready." Her legs felt weak as she stepped outside, the city noise crashing back in. She leaned against the building for a moment, breathing through the panic threatening to rise. This wasn't just about money. The agreement was designed to erase her voice, her story, her existence. Across the street, Liam exited the building with Harper at his side. Harper laughed, head tilted back, utterly unbothered. She glanced at Elena, her smile sharp and satisfied. "Victory," Harper seemed to say. Elena watched them walk away together, the weight of the unsigned folder heavy in her hands. For the first time, she understood the real fight hadn't even begun yet. Elena didn't go back to the apartment Adrian had arranged right away. Instead, she wandered through the city until the streets thinned and the noise softened, carrying the unsigned divorce agreement like it weighed more than paper should. Every step felt disconnected from the one before it, as if she were walking through someone else's life. She stopped at a small cafe that stayed open too late, ordered tea she'd barely touched, and sat by the window watching strangers pass. Couples laughed, friends argued. Someone pressed their forehead to the glass, exhausted, alive. The ordinariness of it all made her chest ache. She pulled the papers from her bag and spread them on the table. This was how it ended then. Not with shouting or tears in a courtroom, just a signature that would erase her quietly, efficiently. A legal disappearance. Her hands began to shake. The tears came suddenly, violently, as if her body had waited for permission. She covered her mouth, shoulders curling inward, the sound of her own sobs foreign and humiliating. She cried for the marriage she thought she had, for the child she lost years ago, for the version of herself that believed love was enough to keep her safe. People glanced over, then looked away. Elena stayed where she was until the cafe closed, until the chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed. Outside, the air was colder, sharper. She hugged her coat tighter around herself and finally headed back. In the quiet of the borrowed apartment, she sank onto the floor beside the bed and let herself fall apart completely. No audience, no restraint, just grief spilling out of her in heaving waves. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Still, she didn't move. On the third vibration, something inside her snapped, not with anger, but with exhaustion. She reached for the phone, eyes swollen, vision blurred. Adrian's name lit the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "I can't do this," she said the moment she heard his voice. "I can't fight him. I don't have anything left." There was a pause on the other end. Not silence. Presence. "You don't need to fight tonight," Adrian said evenly. "Tonight, you rest." "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "That doesn't mean you're done." She slid down against the bed, phone pressed to her ear. What if he wins? Adrian exhaled slowly. Then we make sure his victory doesn't include erasing you. She closed her eyes, listening to the steadiness in his voice, The certainty that didn't ask her to be brave, only honest. "You don't have to sign," he continued. "And you don't have to decide anything right now. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't disappear." Elena swallowed hard. Tears slid down her temples into her hair. "I promise," she said. When the call ended, the room felt less heavy. Not hopeful, just survivable. Elena lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the papers still folded in her bag. She didn't know it yet, but this was the lowest point. And it was also the last night Liam Carter would ever control her future. Elena didn't know about the event until her phone started buzzing nonstop. By the time she checked it, 3 missed calls and a dozen messages waited. Links, screenshots, short lines of disbelief. "Is this about you? Did you know this was happening?" Confused, she opened the first link. Liam stood on a small stage beneath soft white lights, dressed in a tailored suit, his expression carefully solemn. Behind him, the banner of a well-known charity glowed. Cameras were everywhere, phones lifted, attention perfectly framed. "My marriage has been a private struggle," Liam said into the microphone, his voice steady. "I've made mistakes. I wasn't always the husband I should have been." Elena felt her stomach drop. He paused, letting the words settle, letting sympathy bloom. "I want to say publicly that I regret the pain I caused Elena. She deserves kindness, understanding, and space to heal." The crowd murmured. Applause followed, soft at first, then stronger. Elena's hands shook as she watched. She recognized the cadence, the pauses. This wasn't remorse. It was strategy. The camera angle shifted. Harper stood just off stage, head bowed, eyes damp, playing the role of silent support. When she glanced up, her gaze met the lens for half a second, long enough to communicate innocence. A woman beside Elena on the couch whispered, "That's brave of him." Elena turned slowly. She hadn't realized Adrian was there until that moment. He sat in the armchair, arms crossed, jaw tight. "It's a trap," Elena said hoarsely. "Yes," Adrian replied. "And it's effective." The broadcast continued. Liam spoke about mental health, about pressure, about how difficult it was to love someone who struggled privately. He never accused her directly. He didn't have to. By the time the speech ended, the narrative was already set. Elena Brooks, fragile. Liam Carter, remorseful. Her phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "He's being so gracious. You should accept the agreement now." Elena dropped the phone onto the cushion, her chest tight with something close to panic. "If I say anything, I look defensive." "That's the point," Adrian said. "He wants you silent or reactive, nothing in between." She stood abruptly, pacing the room. "He's rewriting the story. He's doing it in public." Adrian didn't interrupt. He waited until she stopped moving. "Do you remember what you said to me in the park?" he asked. "That you wanted space to think?" "Yes." "This is him trying to take that space away." Elena looked back at the paused image on the screen, Liam mid-sentence, the perfect picture of contrition. She felt something shift inside her, not anger, clarity. "He wants me to sign," she said slowly. "This makes me look unreasonable if I don't." Adrian nodded. "Exactly." Elena straightened, her breathing evening out. "Then I won't give him what he wants." "What do you want?" Adrian asked. She met his eyes. Time and the truth on my terms. For the first time since the lock changed, Elena wasn't reacting. She was choosing. And somewhere beneath the applause echoing from the screen, Liam Carter had just overplayed his hand. The meeting took place in a quiet law office tucked between two glass towers, the kind of place designed to disappear in plain sight. Elena almost turned around at the door. Her hand hovered over the handle, pulse loud in her ears. Walking inside meant crossing a line she had spent years protecting. It meant admitting that what Liam had done wasn't just betrayal. It was dangerous. And once she stepped through, there would be no pretending she could go back to who she was before. Adrian didn't rush her. "I'd wait here," he said simply, standing a few feet back in the hallway. "This part is yours." Elena nodded, grateful for the distance. Then she opened the door. Inside, an older man stood as she entered. Silver hair, calm eyes, a presence that felt steady rather than imposing. "Miss Brooks," he said, "I'm Samuel Whitlock." The name landed heavy. Elena swallowed. "You knew my mother." Samuel's expression softened. "Very well." They sat across from each other at a polished table. No small talk, no pleasantries, just truth, waiting. "I didn't come here to expose anything," Elena said quickly. "I just need to understand my options." Samuel nodded. "That's why I agreed to meet." He slid a thin envelope toward her. Not thick, not dramatic, just precise. "Your marriage doesn't void your protections," he explained. "But your husband's actions put him in violation of several laws: financial coercion, asset restriction, misrepresentation." Elena's breath caught. "He said everything he did was legal." "People say many things when they believe no one is watching," Samuel replied. She opened the envelope. Inside were documents she recognized only vaguely: trust frameworks, conditional clauses, timelines. "You were required to remain private until a specific threshold," Samuel continued. "Age, circumstances, and, this part matters, voluntary disclosure." Elena looked up. "Meaning?" "Meaning, no one can force you into the light. Not your husband, not the media, not even me." Her shoulders sagged slightly, relief threading through exhaustion. "But," Samuel added gently, "remaining silent doesn't mean remaining unprotected." He pointed to a page. "This allows us to intervene legally without public disclosure. Quietly. Effectively." Elena stared at the page, heart pounding. "If I do this, he'll know I'm not powerless." "Yes," Samuel said. "And he'll know he miscalculated." A long silence followed. Elena thought of the apology speech, the locked door, the papers designed to erase her. "I don't want to destroy him," she said softly. "I just want him to stop." Samuel met her gaze. "Then this is the correct path." When she stood to leave, her legs felt steadier than they had in days. Outside, Adrian looked up immediately. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Elena exhaled slowly. "There's a way forward." He nodded once. "Good." As they walked down the hallway together, Elena realized something important. She hadn't chosen exposure. She had chosen protection. And for the first time since the night at the Ritz-Carlton, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like something she could finally face. Elena didn't announce her recovery to anyone. There were no speeches, no dramatic declarations, no social media posts hinting at resilience. She rebuilt quietly, the way people do when survival matters more than appearances. Each morning began the same way. She woke before sunrise, made tea, and sat by the window as the city shifted from darkness into motion. The apartment Adrian had arranged was modest but calm. Neutral walls, clean lines. No reminders of what she'd lost. At first, the silence felt unbearable. Then, slowly, it became a refuge. She started therapy twice a week, walking to the office instead of taking a car. The sessions weren't cinematic. There were no breakthroughs that left her breathless, just honest conversations about grief, control, and the way her body still braced for impact even when nothing was coming. Some days, she left feeling lighter. Other days, she cried on the walk home. Both counted as progress. Elena built structure where chaos had lived. She set alarms. She cooked simple meals. She wrote lists, not ambitious ones, just manageable tasks. Drink water. Answer emails. Take a walk. Stay present. On her bedside table, she kept a copy of Atomic Habits, its pages already bent and underlined. Not because it promised transformation, but because it reminded her that change didn't require drama, just consistency. Adrian checked in without hovering. A text every few days, a brief call when something needed explaining. He never asked how she was feeling unless she offered first. That restraint mattered more than she expected. One afternoon, she sat at the small desk near the window, laptop open, reviewing documents Samuel had sent. They weren't about revenge. They were about boundaries. What Liam could no longer do. What she was legally protected from. What steps came next. For the first time, the paperwork didn't make her chest tighten. She noticed changes others wouldn't. The way her shoulders lowered when she walked into a room. How she stopped apologizing for pausing before she answered questions. How she slept through the night without waking to phantom dread. Liam tried to reach her. Not directly at first. Mutual acquaintances mentioned his concern, his confusion, his desire to clear the air. Elena didn't respond. Harper's name appeared in headlines more frequently, attached to campaigns and curated photos. The distance between performance and reality grew obvious to Elena now. She saw the cracks clearly, and she didn't envy her. One evening, as Elena closed her laptop, she caught her reflection in the darkened window. She looked different. Not stronger in a dramatic way, just steadier. She realized something then. Healing wasn't the absence of pain. It was the return of choice. And Elena Brooks was choosing herself again, slowly, deliberately, without asking permission. Liam thought the silence meant surrender. That was his first mistake. Behind closed doors, he began speaking Elena's name again, carefully, selectively, always in rooms where money listened. He mentioned her background in vague terms, never specific enough to be checked, always impressive enough to impress. "She's connected," he told a group of potential investors in a sleek boardroom downtown. "Old money, discreet. She prefers to stay out of the spotlight." The men nodded, intrigued. Discretion sounded expensive. Liam leaned back in his chair, confidence returning with every word. "That's why this divorce needs to be handled quietly. She doesn't like mess." What he didn't say was that he was already using her perceived silence as proof of consent. Documents circulated, pitches were polished. A new venture took shape, one that relied heavily on trust, reputation, and the implication that Liam Carter was still backed by a powerful, invisible spouse. Elena learned about it by accident. Samuel forwarded her an email thread with a single line of explanation. "This concerns you." She read the messages slowly, disbelief settling into cold clarity. Liam had referenced her as a guarantor, not legally yet, but rhetorically. He was selling access to a life he no longer had. Her first instinct was panic. Her second was fury. Adrian didn't let either take control.
"This is where people usually react," he said calmly, standing beside her desk as she stared at the screen. Which is exactly what he expects.
"So what do I do?" Elena asked.
"You let the process work," Adrian replied. "And you decide how visible you want to be."
She shook her head. "I don't want to be visible at all."
Adrian nodded. "Then we do this quietly."
They didn't call Liam. They didn't threaten. They didn't warn. Instead, Samuel prepared a clean, devastating sequence of actions: compliance inquiries, regulatory questions, requests for clarification that exposed contradictions without accusations. The kind of scrutiny that made confident men sweat. Within days, Liam's meetings were postponed, then rescheduled, then quietly canceled. He called Elena that night. She didn't answer. The next day, Harper reached out instead. A carefully worded message wrapped in false concern.
"Liam is under a lot of pressure. Maybe you could help clear things up?" Elena deleted it. By the end of the week, rumors had shifted. Investors whispered about instability, about misrepresentation, about risks they hadn't anticipated. Liam stood in the middle of it all, confused and angry, certain someone was working against him. He was right. But what unsettled him most wasn't the resistance. It was the silence. Because for the first time, Elena wasn't reacting to his moves. She was shaping the board. Elena hadn't planned to run into Harper that afternoon. She was walking along Fifth Avenue with her coat buttoned tight, head down, focused on the rhythm of her steps. The storefront windows reflected versions of her she barely recognized. Calm, composed, almost untouched by the chaos that had consumed her life weeks earlier. That was when a familiar laugh cut through the noise.
"Elena?" She looked up. Harper Lane stood a few feet away, flanked by two women dressed in confidence and luxury, shopping bags swinging casually from their wrists. Harper looked effortless, polished, her smile bright and sharp all at once. "Well," Harper said, eyes flicking over Elena from head to toe. "I didn't expect to see you here." Elena straightened. "I live in this city." Harper laughed softly, as if that were adorable. "Of course. I just assumed things were tight for you right now." One of the women beside Harper smirked. Elena felt eyes on her from passing pedestrians, curiosity sparking as tension settled into the air. "I heard about Liam," Harper continued, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate. "He's been under so much stress. Investors pulling back, meetings canceled. It's been rough." Elena said nothing. Harper tilted her head.
"He really tried to protect you, you know. The agreement he offered was generous. Most women would have been grateful."
Grateful. The word landed exactly where Harper intended. "You should have signed," Harper went on, her smile widening. "Dragging this out only makes you look bitter." Elena felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the instinct to defend herself, to explain. She let it pass. Harper leaned in slightly. "Between us, you never belonged in his world. You were just convenient." The women beside her laughed quietly. For a moment, Fifth Avenue seemed to narrow, the sound fading, the city holding its breath. Then Elena met Harper's gaze. "You're right about one thing," Elena said calmly. "I don't belong in his world." Harper's smile faltered just barely. "I belong in my own." The shift was subtle, but it was there.
Harper's eyes flicked away, then back, searching for a reaction she wasn't getting.
"You think you've won something," Harper said sharply. "But trust me, men like Liam always land on their feet." Elena nodded. "Sometimes, until they don't." Harper scoffed. "You're bluffing." Elena stepped back, giving Harper space, her voice even. "This conversation is over." She turned and walked away, her heartbeat steady, her steps unhurried. Behind her, Harper's voice followed, louder now, edged with frustration. "You're nothing without him." Elena didn't turn around. She didn't need to. That night, her phone buzzed with a notification from Samuel. Regulatory inquiry officially opened. More to follow. Elena stared at the message, then set the phone down, a quiet sense of inevitability settling in her chest. Harper had wanted a public victory.
What she didn't understand was that consequences didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, they crept in quietly, right when arrogance was at its peak. The night before the court date was unnervingly quiet. Elena stood by the window of the apartment, watching the Manhattan skyline pulse with indifferent light. Cars moved like veins of fire below, the city alive and unconcerned with the way her chest tightened every time she thought about the morning ahead. Tomorrow, everything would be decided. She hadn't seen Liam in days, not in person, not on a screen. His absence felt deliberate now, like a tactic. Silence had become his final form of control, waiting for her to crack, to reach out, to beg for relief from the pressure he'd created. She didn't. A soft knock sounded behind her. Adrian stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like a man who had been thinking too much.
"I brought documents," he said, holding up a thin folder. "Nothing urgent, just updates." Elena nodded and crossed the room, but instead of taking the folder, she set it aside untouched. "Do you ever get tired of being calm?" she asked suddenly. Adrian studied her for a moment. "All the time." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Everyone keeps telling me I'm handling this well. I don't feel strong. I feel hollow." "That doesn't mean you're weak," Adrian said. "It means you're human." They sat at opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance between them. The silence wasn't heavy. It was restrained, like something holding its breath. "I was thinking about signing," Elena admitted quietly. "Just to make it stop."
Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "You don't have to justify that thought. Pressure makes people consider exits."
"I won't," she added quickly. "But I thought about it."
"That's not failure," he said. "That's fatigue."
Elena leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "After tomorrow, I don't know what my life looks like." Adrian hesitated. The room felt suddenly smaller. "I need to say something," he began, then stopped. She turned toward him. "What?" He looked at his hands, then back at her. "This isn't the moment for promises, or expectations. But I don't want you to mistake my distance for indifference." Her heart skipped, then steadied. "I care about you," Adrian continued, choosing each word carefully. "Enough to wait. Enough not to complicate what you need to do tomorrow." Elena swallowed hard.
"Thank you for not turning this into something I have to manage."
Adrian nodded. "Whatever happens after, it should be your choice, free of obligation." The clock ticked softly on the wall. Outside, the city kept moving. Elena stood, walking back to the window. "Tomorrow," she said, "he'll think he's walking into a win." Adrian joined her, stopping a respectful distance away. Men like Liam always do. She closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. Then let tomorrow come. As Adrian prepared to leave, he paused at the door. No matter what happens in that courtroom, he said, you won't be alone when you walk out. Elena met his gaze, something steady settling in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready. The courtroom was colder than Elena expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning hummed relentlessly, but emotionally.
The kind of cold that stripped everything down to facts, documents, and faces trained not to react. Elena sat at the small table, hands folded, spine straight, her expression neutral. She wore no jewelry, no statement colors, nothing that asked to be noticed. Across the aisle, Liam Carter looked relaxed. Too relaxed. He sat back in his chair with the ease of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. His suit was impeccable, his hair perfectly styled, his confidence almost casual. When his eyes met Elena's, he smiled. It wasn't warm, it was satisfied. Harper sat behind him, legs crossed, scrolling on her phone as if the proceedings were a minor inconvenience. She glanced up once, caught Elena's gaze, and smirked before looking away again. The judge entered. Everyone stood. As they sat, Elena felt her pulse slow instead of spike. She'd expected fear, panic. Instead, there was a strange stillness inside her, like the quiet that comes right before a storm breaks. Liam's attorney spoke first. He laid out the narrative smoothly: irreconcilable differences, emotional strain, a wife who preferred privacy and had withdrawn from shared responsibilities. He emphasized Liam's willingness to settle quietly, generously. Liam nodded at all the right moments. When it was Elena's turn to respond, her lawyer rose calmly, asking only for a brief delay to submit supplemental materials. Liam's smile widened. Your Honor, his attorney said, this is unnecessary. My client has been more than reasonable. Prolonging this process only increases distress. The judge glanced down at the documents, then up at Elena. Ms. Brooks, is this delay requested with your consent? Yes, Your Honor, Elena replied evenly. Liam shifted in his seat for the first time. The clerk accepted a thin stack of papers from Elena's counsel. They weren't dramatic, no thick binders, no grand reveals, just precise documentation. As the judge read, the room grew quiet. Liam leaned toward his attorney, whispering something Elena couldn't hear. Harper stopped scrolling. The judge looked up. Mr. Carter, she said, her tone measured. Were you aware that restricting access to joint accounts without court approval may constitute financial coercion? Liam's smile faltered. My understanding was, and were you also aware, the judge continued, that referencing your spouse as a guarantor or implied backer in financial negotiations during an active divorce could be considered misrepresentation? The color drained from Liam's face. Harper's head snapped up. For the first time, Liam looked directly at Elena, not with confidence, but with confusion. She met his gaze calmly. No anger, no triumph, just certainty. The judge set the papers down. This court will not proceed under the assumption that this matter is uncontested or simple. A pause. This hearing is adjourned, pending further review. The gavel struck. Liam sat frozen, his early smile now a liability he couldn't take back. As Elena stood, gathering her things, she felt it clearly. He hadn't lost yet, but he had misjudged the moment. And that mistake would cost him everything. The second hearing didn't feel like a battle. It felt like an autopsy.
Elena returned to the courtroom 3 days later with the same calm posture, the same measured breath. Nothing about her appearance signaled victory or fear. She looked like a woman who had already accepted whatever the truth would bring. Liam looked different.
The confidence from the first hearing was gone, replaced by a tightness around his eyes, a restlessness in his movements. His attorney whispered more than he spoke. Harper wasn't beside him this time. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. The judge opened the session without ceremony. "We are here to clarify representations made by both parties," she said, "and to determine whether this court has been misled." Elena's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has not sought public disclosure. She seeks only protection under existing law." The judge nodded. "Proceed." What followed wasn't a dramatic reveal. There were no gasps, no raised voices, just facts. A trust framework established years ago, legal guardianship clauses, independent verification from a Park Avenue law firm confirming that Elena Brooks had never relinquished her protections, only chosen privacy. "She did not claim wealth," her lawyer said evenly. "She never used it. She never threatened with it. She simply did not surrender her rights." Liam's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial. My client was never informed." "That is not the issue," the judge interrupted. "The issue is whether your client acted as though he was entitled to information and assets he was not." Liam opened his mouth, then closed it again. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Carter, you presented yourself to investors as supported by a spouse of significant means. Was that accurate?" Liam hesitated. Elena felt the room hold its breath. "I believed it to be," he said finally. "Believed." The judge's expression hardened. "Belief is not consent." She turned another page. "You also restricted access to marital funds, changed residential access, and initiated legal proceedings while controlling all financial channels." Each word landed with precision. Elena didn't look at Liam. She didn't need to. She looked straight ahead, hands folded, heart steady. "This court finds that Ms. Brooks acted within her legal rights at all times," the judge continued, "and that Mr. Carter did not." A pause. "This matter will proceed under revised terms. Any attempt to misrepresent Ms. Brooks's status or resources will be subject to sanction." The gavel came down, not to end the case, but to reset it. Liam sat back, stunned. He hadn't been exposed as a villain. He'd been exposed as careless. And in his world, that was worse. As Elena rose to leave, she felt no rush of triumph, no hunger for apology, just relief. Outside the courtroom, Adrian waited quietly, hands at his sides. "It's done," she said softly. He nodded. "You handled it exactly how you wanted." Elena stepped into the hallway, sunlight filtering through tall windows, and realized something important. The truth didn't need fireworks. It only needed the right moment. And now, the ending was finally hers to choose. The hallway outside the courtroom felt strangely quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Elena stood near the tall windows overlooking the street below, sunlight washing over the marble floor. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she needed to leave quickly. She wasn't running anymore. Footsteps approached behind her. "Elena." She turned. It was Adrian. He stopped a respectful distance away, the same way he always did, his expression steady but unreadable. The courtroom doors closed behind him, muting the sounds of lawyers and clerks packing up the aftermath of someone else's downfall. "You were incredible in there," he said softly. Elena shook her head.
I was just honest.
That's rarer than people think, Adrian replied. They stood in silence for a moment. The city moved below them, taxis cutting through traffic, people hurrying toward lives untouched by what had just happened upstairs.
I thought I'd feel victorious, Elena admitted. Or angry. Or relieved.
And? Adrian asked. She considered it.
I feel clear.
Adrian nodded slowly. Clarity is powerful. He hesitated, then spoke again, his voice lower now. There's something I need to say. Not as your ally, not as someone helping you navigate this. Elena's pulse quickened, though she didn't move. As a man. She met his gaze, steady and open.
Okay.
Adrian drew a quiet breath. I didn't stay close because I wanted to fix you or save you. I stayed because I respected you. Because even when everything was being taken from you, you never tried to take shortcuts. Elena's throat tightened.
I've cared about you for a long time, he continued.
Long enough to know that saying this before today would have been selfish. The words settled between them, heavy but sincere. I'm not asking for anything, Adrian added quickly. You don't owe me a response, or a feeling. I just didn't want this chapter to end with silence. Elena looked away briefly, pressing her fingertips against the cool glass. She thought of the bench in Central Park, the locked door, the night she cried on the floor believing she had nothing left. Then she looked back at him.
Thank you for waiting, she said.
Adrian's expression softened, but he didn't step closer.
I don't know what comes next,
Elena went on.
For me, for us, but for the first time I get to decide without fear.
That's all I ever hoped for, Adrian replied. Down the hall, voices rose, Liam's voice among them, sharp, frantic, arguing with someone she couldn't see. Elena didn't turn toward the sound. Instead, she took one step forward, then another, closing the distance between herself and Adrian, not touching, but choosing proximity.
Let's not rush, she said.
Adrian nodded, a small smile breaking through his composure. We won't. As they walked toward the exit together, Elena knew something had shifted permanently. Not because someone had chosen her, but because she had finally chosen herself, and love, if it came, would meet her there. The divorce was finalized quietly. There were no cameras, no dramatic headlines, no victory lap for anyone involved. Liam Carter walked out of the courthouse smaller than he had entered it, no longer a rising star, no longer insulated by confidence or illusion. Investigations followed him like a shadow. Partnerships dissolved. Invitations stopped coming. The world he'd built on shortcuts and borrowed credibility began to collapse under its own weight. Harper disappeared just as quickly. Her carefully curated presence faded when association became liability. Campaigns dropped her name. Calls went unanswered. The same ambition that had lifted her too fast now abandoned her just as efficiently. There was no public shaming, just absence. And in the circles she valued most, absence was everything. Elena didn't watch any of it unfold. She was busy living. Months passed. Spring softened into summer. Elena moved into a place of her own overlooking a quiet stretch of trees, sunlight spilling across hardwood floors every morning. She returned to work on her terms, consulting for causes she believed in, funding initiatives that protected people from the kind of financial control she'd survived. She didn't announce her resources. She used them. Her name stayed out of magazines and gossip columns. It appeared instead in grant letters, legal precedents, and quiet thank you notes from women who had been told they were powerless and learned otherwise. Adrian remained beside her, never ahead, never behind. Their relationship grew slowly, deliberately, shaped by honesty instead of urgency. They talked. They waited. They chose each other again and again, without pressure or performance. On a warm evening in early fall, they stood together at the edge of Central Park, the same place where Elena had once believed she was alone. "You've changed," Adrian said softly. Elena smiled. "I've come home to myself." He reached for her hand, tentative even now. She intertwined her fingers with his without hesitation. A year later, they married in a private ceremony overlooking the water, surrounded by a small circle of people who knew the whole story and loved her anyway. No spectacle, no proving, just peace. Elena didn't take Adrian's name. She didn't need to. She had reclaimed her own. On the morning after the wedding, Elena stood by the window with a cup of coffee warming her hands. The city stretched out below, familiar and unthreatening. Adrian came up behind her, resting his forehead gently against her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought of the locked door, the bench in the park, the papers meant to erase her. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. "Everything that tried to break me taught me what I deserved." Adrian kissed her temple, smiling. Elena closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet certainty of a life built not on illusion, but on truth, choice, and earned love. She hadn't won by destroying anyone. She'd won by becoming unbreakable. And so, the story comes to a close. If you're still here with us right now, thank you. Truly. Because staying until this moment usually means something in this story touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe you saw yourself in Elena's silence. Maybe you recognized the exhaustion of explaining your pain to someone who refused to listen. Or maybe you felt that small but powerful shift, the moment she stopped fighting to be understood and started choosing herself. There's a lesson here that reaches far beyond drama. The Stoics believed that you have power over your mind, not outside events. And another reminder from Marcus Aurelius feels especially fitting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Elena didn't heal by destroying her enemies. She healed by reclaiming her agency, her clarity, and her self-respect. She learned that dignity is not something others grant us, it's something we protect. If this story resonated with you, let it be a gentle reminder. You don't need to rush, prove, or perform your healing. Quiet strength is still strength. Boundaries are not cruelty. And choosing yourself is not selfish, it's survival. If this message spoke to you, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, awaken, and remind us all of our worth.